Lizzie.
And I'm Brenda.
And welcome back to Small Step Society. This is Season 2, Episode 7, Power of Words.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Hey everyone!
Hey!
We're back with another episode.
Yay!
Yes, but before we go in to the topic, we gotta do our weekly segment, which is Song of the Moment. So Brenda, what's your Song of the Moment?
My song is Up All Night by James Bay, The Lumineers, and Noah Kahan, all in one.
Oh, I've heard this song before.
Oh my gosh, have you?
Yeah.
2 in a row, let's go.
Yes!
That's crazy.
Because it came out in the summer, didn't it?
I actually have no idea.
Oh, I think the 1 week I was home, I was listening to it.
Crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy.
It's a star-studded cast. Yeah, fun one.
Mm-hmm.
What's your song?
My song is called Me in the Sky by Jen Colella from the musical Come From Away.
Oh, I've never heard of the musical.
Yeah, the musical's pretty good, but this song is really, really cool because it's about Beverly Bass, who is the first female captain of the American Airlines commercial plane.
Oh,
So it's pretty cool.
interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this episode is called Power of Words, and I feel like in general, words are super important because words have the power to create or destroy and can be used to like build people up or tear them down as well. And also words can inspire people or like invoke fear. And the right word said at the right time to a person can really like change their life in a better way. But wrong words said at the wrong time can totally ruin someone's life too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like words are so powerful, and I feel like a lot of times it's underestimated. So we just want to talk about how we should be thoughtful and careful with our word choices.
Yeah. And also, with great power, the power of words, comes great responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So wield your words like they are sharp weapons, because
Yes.
sometimes they are.
Mm-hmm. I think we're going to start with a little bit of science because we brought some evolution things in the past episodes. So we're going to bring back science again. But before the science, I wanted to talk about this common quote, which is, "The sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me." And this is normally used to hide how hurtful the words were. But scientifically, this is not true because words hurt and they have lasting negative impact in your brain, in your like physical health and mental health. So yeah. So there's a study by Maria Ricketer and her team called Do Words Hurt? And they investigated the neural mechanism underlying the processing of pain-related negative, positive, and neutral words. And they monitor subjects' brain responses to auditory and imagined negative words. During this process, they discovered the implicit processing of painful or negative words within the subgenual anterior cingulate cortex, also known as SAC. And that's where the emotion is localized. So this proved that negative words release stress and anxiety-inducing hormones in subjects.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's another study that was done in 2019 by Taeyeon Yoon and their team. And this study was of college students, and they found that verbal abuse from peers had real-life effects on daily life. So some people experienced the fear of being assertive and had trouble remembering appointments and obligations, and some also had physical changes that increased irritability.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, in fact, words hold a lot of power and can cause neurological changes and physical responses too. So that quote that I just said is wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, kind of scientifically related, I wanted to talk about linguistic relativity, which is basically the idea that any sort of, like any particular language that we speak influences the way we think about reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is something that is, this is a proposal that is highly relevant to a lot of linguistic studies. But it shows that basically language does affect how you think. In fact, like both speaking different languages and also just speaking to yourself in a single language can affect the different ways you're thinking and the different ways you act.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these studies just show like there are a lot of ways that words can affect you, both just in the way you think about things, but also in the way you react to things. So now that we have that scientific basis to all of this, let's get into it.
Yes. So, as our past episodes showed, we're going to talk about self and then kind of branch it out to general. So, what causes a negative critical voice?
Yeah, well, the critical inner voice is made up of a series of negative thoughts and attitudes towards self and others, which is at the core of a person's maladaptive behavior. It can be conceptualized as the language of a defensive process that is both hostile and cynical. And that kind of definition is from the Milton H. Erickson Foundation. But essentially what that quote is saying is that the negative critical voice is made up of all your experiences that have both shaped your attitudes and shaped the way you think about things, both internally, so like your own conception about yourself, as well as your conception about the world around you. And then that creates this negative inner voice that, you know, you have to fight hard to let go of. And so, like I said, it starts by internalizing certain lessons that we learn throughout our childhood, whether it be early childhood experiences or also observing certain patterns as we grow up. And I will just say, like, our mind is highly sensitive to observing patterns. So if you notice that, like, you make a mistake in one area a lot, you start forming, like, a negative association with that, and then you kind of create this criticism inside your head, and it's hard to shake. And so we hang on to these kinds of negative emotions or learnings from these experiences because we think it will help us prepare for disappointment or hurt. Sometimes we think it might even motivate us. You know, I feel like people often say there's a balance between being critical and being not critical, I guess. So that's another thing that can happen. Or sometimes we think it'll just help us be successful in life because we're always still being cautious, you know. But funny enough, a psychologist from the University of Michigan, Ethan Cross, he said a little bit of self-critique is not a bad thing. The problem is that rather than objectively scrutinize the issue and come up with a solution, we get stuck because the emotion takes over. Essentially, that's the hard part of letting go of the negative critical voice, is that the critical voice isn't a bad thing. It's always good to kind of have that system of checks and balances in your mind, but once you kind of let go of that logical portion of it and only get attached to the negative emotions that form because of it, you lose sight of why the critical voice is important, and you only start focusing on the negative, like, self-internalized feelings that you have.
Yeah.
But the challenge of the day is to fight it.
Yes, that is the hard part.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that leads us into the importance of positive self-talk. And I kind of want to bring back the science part with the brain. So Dr. Andrew Newberg, a neuroscientist at the Thomas Jefferson University, and Mark Robert Waldman, a communications expert, wrote a book together called Words Can Change Your Brain. And in their book, they talk about how exercising positive thoughts can quite literally change one's reality. And they say that by holding a positive and optimistic word in your mind, you stimulate frontal lobe activity. This area includes specific language centers that connect directly to the motor cortex responsible for moving you into action. And as our research has shown, the longer you concentrate on positive words, the more you begin to affect other areas of the brain. So positive thought also impacts your brain, just like how the negative thought impacts your brain.
Yeah, like if you're telling yourself good things, then you're more likely to be motivated to actually do those good things.
And it like uses more of your brain, so you're more active and you're more willing to do other things too. Yeah, and also as humans, our thought patterns directly shape our perception of the world, which you mentioned with the linguistic study above, and those around us, and our thoughts become our words. So, in essence, the way we talk to others and treat others in extension stems from the way we talk to ourselves, which we covered a lot of times in the past episodes, so we won't go deep into it. But the reason we mention it every week is because it's true, right? And it seems like it's the basis of everything.
Yeah, and I feel like that all leads up to this episode about the power of words. Is literally the way you talk to others, the words that you have.
And the way you talk to yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And this was a quote that I saw when we were doing the research that I really liked. It says, "Words are seeds that do more than blow around. They land in our hearts and not the ground. Be careful what you plant and be careful what you say. You might have to eat what you planted one day.
So how do you talk to yourself? How do you form that positive self-talk?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I mentioned this probably, I think, in the last episode, but every time you catch yourself with a negative inner thought, fight it with 2 positive thoughts. And make sure that you're making them realistic. Like, a lot of the times I struggle with doing that because I'm like, okay, I can lie to myself all I want, but, you know, it's not actually helping me.
Yeah.
But one, I think it actually does, like, maybe implicitly, like, you don't realize that it is, but sometimes just having those positive thoughts going, even if you don't, like, maybe consciously believe in it, just motivates, you know, whatever's going on in your mind. But also, if you're making them a little more realistic, like, you're more likely to believe them, like, consciously.
Yeah, that's true.
Because a lot of the times, our own worst enemy is ourselves. So, just being mindful of being realistic, but also being positive is helpful. Also, just try to distance yourself from negative thoughts in a healthy manner. I mean, sometimes you do need to face your problems head on, but if you find yourself constantly having negative thoughts at night, for example, keep yourself occupied before you go to bed. Make yourself tired before you go to bed so you don't then lie there and think those negative thoughts, for example. Just find ways to keep your mind busy or keep your mind off of those negative thoughts so that hopefully one day you don't need to do that because your mind's just not used to thinking them.
Another way to distance yourself from negative thoughts that works for me is just laughing about it. Like this past week, I had a pretty hard chemistry exam, and I don't think I felt worse about an exam ever until that exam, right? And then I came out, and I was like, there's nothing I can do about it, right? And I could sulk about it, but I just called my mom, and I was like, laughing the whole time explaining what happened, and she was also laughing because she's like, well, if you're laughing it must be fine, right? And then I think in the moment I wasn't okay, but it didn't like ruin my mood for that long. Like I got over it quicker because I was like, haha, it's okay, you know,
because you can't do anything about it.
And I think that's kind of like the implicitly believing that it's okay.
Because like even if you didn't believe in the moment, a week later you're not sulking as much.
Right, and I'm still alive and like nothing happened, so.
Yeah. So moving into how you express yourself to others and just generally are a considerate communicator, I think the number one thing is don't be a bully. And I know a lot of the times you don't intend maybe to be a bully or to be rude, and sometimes it happens. So there are ways that you can be mindful of that. And so one is being careful about how your tone comes across when talking to others. And a lot of the times when we're talking to people, especially if we've been having a bad day or we're angry at something, sometimes our experience in one area of our life bleeds over to the current area of our life that we're in. And oftentimes we do have to be really mindful and aware of how we're talking to people and approaching them.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if you're having a bad day, there's no reason that should affect someone else.
Yeah. I think a way to be mindful of your tone is just slowing down when you're talking to others and responding to others. And this happens during conversations too, but definitely when it's over like written conversations, like emails, texts, social media, what have you. Especially because tone doesn't go through like written words, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like sometimes you don't intend to mean it that way, but like it can be taken that way. And also with those written words, like you have more time to prepare and like you have more time to like kind of reread it and be like, ooh, can they interpret this in another way than I intended to?
You know what's actually funny is in the syllabus for one of my classes, they have a specific section about emailing your professors or your graduate student instructors. And in that it says you have something along the lines of you need to have like a 3-hour cool down period before, like after you get a grade or something, before emailing goes. And honestly, that's a great thing to take into your life in general. Like if you're angry about something or if you're sad about something, first of all, take account of what your emotions are when you're writing an email, especially if it's an important one. Especially if it's something that like is related to the negative emotion you're feeling. Like if you're angry about something and that person is behind it, take that cool down period. Because it's not even that like, it might be actually really obvious 3 hours later that your email is a mean one. You know? But in the moment you just don't notice it. It's crazy actually how that works.
For sure. Yeah. And I found another quote that kind of encompasses the whole thing that we talked about.
Mhm.
And it says, don't mix bad words with your bad mood. You'll have many opportunities to change a mood, but you'll never get the opportunity to replace the words you spoke.
That is so true.
Yes. So just really rehashing, like being considerate and being very mindful of your words and your tone when you are having a hard time.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Another point that I feel like we do a lot in our own podcast is validating and empathizing. If you watch our podcast, you probably know that Liz and I bounce off of each other a lot, and sometimes we'll agree, we'll say we'll say yeah, things like that. But essentially, you should both reflect words back to people so they know you're listening, and then you should also empathize with them.
Mm-hmm.
According to Sarita Mabin, a communication expert, doing this will help people feel truly heard and also feel safer sharing their concerns with you, which ultimately, when you're talking to people, is what you want. You want them to feel like they're having a meaningful conversation with you and not that you're just talking at each other. You want to be talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Another good point is to show confidence when you speak, but also be humble. So people are more likely to pay attention to you if you sound like you mean what you're saying, rather than mumbling or being hesitant or saying a lot, saying like. If you do need to use those filler words, just take a pause in the middle of what you're saying and take your moment to collect your thoughts. There's nothing wrong with that. We all do it. But also make sure that you're not bragging about yourself, and also make sure you're not dominating a conversation, especially when we have a lot of words to get out and we have a lot of thoughts like going and going.
Yeah.
We want to kind of just spit them all out at once, but you also need to be careful to validate what the other person's saying and give them a chance to also validate what you're saying in a way by responding to your thoughts. And also, you want to make sure that you're not imposing your feelings or thoughts onto others. So let people say what they're saying and try not to assume. And a lot of the times, it's really hard to do that because you don't notice that you're assuming things. Especially because I feel like a lot of human communication relies somewhat on like at least assuming like what body language means.
Yeah.
And, like what all of these external cues other than the words that are being spoken mean. But especially if it's like something that's a serious conversation or maybe a more confrontational type of conversation, really be careful not to assume and ask questions. Especially if you're asking questions with a positive tone, like that's always a good thing.
Yeah, it's just that our brains are so wired to kind of be like the search engine, where it's just like automatically filling in the blank, like all the options that could be said, you know? So,
yeah. I know. I feel like recently I noticed that I do that a lot.
Oh, really?
Or, yeah, because I don't know, my mind's just like, and so, yeah, sometimes I need to like take a step back and just wait for the person to finish their sentence.
Yeah.
It's really not that hard, you know? But in the same way, actually, you also need to know when to be quiet versus when you should stand your ground. So good questions to ask yourself as a kind of litmus test is, will it matter to you 1 week from now? If not, maybe it's better to just let the conversation die where it is and just, you know, step aside to collect your thoughts instead of like reacting in the moment. Another question is whatever you're talking about something that comes up constantly? So if you're in a confrontational situation and you're specifically, I guess, arguing about something that has been a recurring issue, then maybe it is something that where you should stand your ground and make sure that the other person really is hearing you. But maybe if it's a one-time scenario and you just want to like bring whatever's happening to their attention, just make it that. You know, you don't always need to be lecturing people about something the one time it happens. And you also want to make sure, like, especially in a situation where there are two opposing opinions, you don't want to, like, dominate the conversation. You also don't want to, like, lecture the other person because, like, that, I think, in some sense will only hurt the relationship between you two more because the other person will feel like they don't have any voice and they don't have kind of, like, any place in the conversation. And a conversation always requires two people to actually be talking. Yep.
It's true. But all that to say, I think our little season 2 tradition is ending with a quote. So we have a quote from Mother Teresa. It goes, "Kind words can be short and easy to speak, but their echoes are truly endless." So we challenge you this week to say a lot of kind words.
And mean them.
Yes.
And with that, I think this episode is coming to a close.
Yes.
But just as a reminder, we do post every single Sunday. You can find us on YouTube to watch our video, but if you just want to listen to us, you can do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you can find podcasts except where you can't. And also keep up with us on Instagram at Small Step Society Pod. And with that, we'll see you next Sunday.
Thank you.
Bye!
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.